Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on with attorneys who are at the top of their game in various facets of the law to help you understand the various ins and outs of the legal field and other jurisdictions, because if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today is going to be an interesting conversation. I am meeting with Everett Martinez, and Everett currently works for, he's the, if I'm not mistaken, the Assistant City Attorney Section Supervisor at the Denver International Airport. And so he's got some really interesting things we can talk about related to that aspect of his life. He's also a Harvard grad. So we will be talking with Everett here very shortly. First, we are going to jump over. If you want to connect with Everett, we do have his LinkedIn profile, since he doesn't have he's not an attorney attached to a firm currently. We could show you flydenver.com, obviously is the Denver airport website. I guess that would technically be his employer where he works now. But if you do want to connect with Everett, we'll make sure his LinkedIn profile and stuff is down below as well. So here we go. That being said, we're going to go ahead and jump over and do a reading from one of our sponsors. And our first sponsor today is a new one for the week. Again, it's Groove Funnels. You can visit them at theattorneypost.com/groove. If you like spending $5,000 on a new website and you love $79 to $100 bills every month just to host on a platform that allows you to sell your product to potential clients and customers, then you should probably keep doing what you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that concept. And that's why I recommend personally Groove Pages. The all-new, all-in-one website funnel sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete website, actually 3 complete websites at no cost, really. 3 complete websites where you can sell an unlimited number of products and even have affiliates who can sell your products for you, all without any fees. It is literally the last online sales system that you will ever need, and it's completely free. It is a replacement for all sorts of, it's like a Swiss Army knife. It's a replacement. And you can see literally live, people are signing up for this still, for all sorts of different products out there, from ClickFunnels to Samcart to Kajabi and Vimeo to Shopify, Zapier, WordPress, Zendesk, Calendly, EverWebinar. They've got new webinar stuff coming out actually at the end of this month for automated webinars. And then eventually they'll have live webinars as well. And in fact, I don't know if it was bad blood or not, but Mike Filsaime, who is the creator of Groove Pages, was one of the founding members of Webinar Jam as well. So I don't know if they parted ways, or he just wanted to do something different, or what it is. I actually don't know the story on that one, but the product itself is very, very cool. And in fact, our second sponsor website will be built on the Groove Funnels platform, which is kind of neat. So again, you can visit theattorneypost.com/groove in order to sign up. All righty. Well, Everett, how are you doing, man?
Good. How you doing, Justin?
I am doing good. Well, we're going to have a very lighthearted discussion today. I'm not going to, we're just going to kind of dig through Everett's career. Everett has had a very interesting career in law. Again, he currently works for the city and or county of Denver. He works for the International Airport. He's a Harvard grad, graduated in 2007, if I'm not mistaken. He studied under greats like Alan Dershowitz. Apparently, he's got some really interesting inside Harvard stories to tell us. He's been involved in public finance. And again, he's working in-house right now with a government entity. But he's just got a whole host of stuff that we can talk about and have some fun with. So the first question I always ask Everett, and I'm going to leave it very wide open for you, is what did I miss?
Sure. No, you didn't miss this with kind of a distinction. My title is also Assistant General Counsel to Denver International, because the airport is essentially a business run and owned by city and county of Denver. We have this business structure. So yeah, I work for the city attorney's office, but because I head up that department, it's Assistant General Counsel, like you would find in any normal Fortune 500 company.
Gotcha.
That's
gotcha.
it. Otherwise, it was spot on.
Well, I do a little bit of research here and there. So, all right. Well, so Everett, you have had an interesting career that's brought you into doing this particular thing. What got you into law in the first place? Did you always know you were just one of those kids that wanted to be a lawyer? Like I wanted to be a cartoonist growing up, and I thought if being a cartoonist didn't work out, I'd be an attorney. And I dabbled. I never actually went to law school, and I got into, got married, got 5 kids, and decided I needed to put food on the table right away. Got into marketing. What led you into law, and then what led you ultimately to where you are right now?
Sure. I think it kind of switched back and forth for me. When I was a little kid, my mother used to always like overdress me. Like I'd go to school with like a tie and just silly things when I was in preschool. And my grandfather used to say, "That's my lawyer. He's gonna be my lawyer one day." And I used to like to play like with my cousins, like pretending we were working like in an office, which is, looking back on, I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. But but then that went away, and I had dreams of doing things like you were saying. Like I thought about being an architect. I really considered becoming a fireman. That was something that I really thought about doing when I was 18. But when I went to college, went to the University of Colorado, I finished the degree in psychology, and I thought I'm going to become a psychiatrist because nothing more interesting than the human mind.
Yeah.
But I had a bunch of credits left over that I needed to fill after I'd already done that. So I did political science and loved it. And it was kind of an unusual time in the country. It was during like the Bush-Gore election. 9/11 happened during that time. So it was really pivotal time in the world of politics. And so I'm about ready to graduate. And I think, do I really want to go on to med school and be a psychiatrist and have to deal with other people's problems when as a human, I have my own struggles that I don't need to be, saturating myself with other people's problems. I think it wouldn't work well for me. And it's kind of funny that it took me till the very end. I mean, this was probably a month or two before graduation where I was like, maybe I'll go into law school or go to law school. And there was a professor that was the head of my department at the University of Colorado at Denver. His name's Glenn Morris, and he's kind of a well-known like political activist in the community here. He's a Native American. He's a Harvard Law graduate as well. And I didn't ever have a class with him, but people had told him, hey, there's this guy in our department that, has the grades to go there. You should meet him. And I met him, and he was like the first person that said, I think you can do this. You should do it. It's going to open up so many doors for you, even if you don't want to be a lawyer. And I thought, I don't really want to be a lawyer. But, if I got into Harvard, I'd have to take it. If that, super reach, if I could do that, I'd take it. And Glenn was great. And he wrote me a letter of recommendation too, saying, I know what it takes, and this guy's got it. And I got in. I applied to all the U.S. News and World Report top schools, and I got into every one of them to my surprise. Wow. And Harvard was one of the very first ones, and I immediately said yes because I thought that was the golden ticket on many levels. So that's how I ended up there. It was a passion. And then when I was in law school, I also kind of thought like, I'm just doing this to work a couple years in a law firm and make some good money and then do something in the world of politics. And here I am 15 years later, and I'm still a lawyer, no political aspirations or career moves at this time.
I mean, that works. That's impressive. When I went to graduate school, I applied to a bunch of different places as well. I did not get into Harvard. Actually, I didn't apply to Harvard. I got into Notre Dame, but they didn't offer me any money. And I wound up going out to DC to CUA, Catholic University of America, because they gave me a full ride. I was like, okay, I'll take that. Of course, you still go, when you're married with kids, you still go way into debt pursuing a degree because you're still going to put food on the table while you're working and everything else. So that's actually what led me back and into marketing. So again, I had to put food on the table. So let's talk a little bit about Harvard, because I know you got some interesting stories about what happened there. One of the things that you had mentioned before, so obviously we're meeting virtually right now, and we're going to talk about the pandemic and how it's affected, the airport and whatnot down the road. But obviously, everything is going virtual in a real way, but you have some really unique virtual experience. In fact, you had to take a final in a virtual world. How did that come about?
Yeah, so there's a professor. I don't know if he's still, if he's retired or not, but I know he's still alive. His name is Charles Neeson, and he is a legendary professor at Harvard. I believe he may have had the highest GPA in the school's history. That was the word I always heard. And this was before like Steve Jobs was known as, wearing the black turtleneck and like the same outfit every day. This guy dressed like that every day, was riding a Vespa scooter before that was a thing. And, he was already an elderly man at that time, but just really a character. And I had him for evidence. And, it's surprising but common that a lot of evidence professors will show you the film My Cousin Vinny with Joe Pesci, because it's actually very accurate. Aside from the, comical nature of the film, the way he learns how to try the case is actually spot on of the things you need to know. But he, in the professor's quirkiness, he had us watch that to learn evidence. It was a big chunk of the time that we actually spent discussing things. Showed us a clip from 8 Mile with a rap battle with Eminem, because he was teaching us that you need to put out there your bad sides first in a trial before the other guy can do it. And that's what Eminem does in the final rap battle. So it actually makes sense. He had a method to his madness. And one of the odd things he used to do, but we're all odd, I guess. The Harvard people are different. They're wonderfully nice people, but there's something different about them. And he used to walk around, I think, with like a digital audio recorder, and would walk to school and record his thoughts, and not about evidence or the law, but like, look at the architecture of that building and how beautiful the leaves are. And we'd listen to this for like 15 minutes every day. And it was just bizarre. But then he told us, he said, there's this new, I don't remember what they called it at the time, but it was like, in my mind, it was a website, because this was way before virtual worlds were around as we know them today. And it's called Second Life, which is now, I think, quite popular, or was. It might have even outlived its fame. But we had to create an avatar, and there was an actual Harvard Law world on Second Life, where someone built it, looked exactly like the school. You could go into the buildings, and the seats were the same. And we had to meet outside. I think he was a wizard as a professor, and we had to talk. Like, we had to, type. We'd ask questions. We would have to interact with them, and that's how we held the final exam for that class.
There's the Second Life Open Educational Virtual Worlds Berkman
there you
Klein
go.
Center.
Charles Nesson right there. I believe that's his daughter that's listed with him there.
That's funny. Yeah, Charles.
It lives on 15 years later.
It lives on. So there you go. If you guys want to experience Harvard, but you can't quite get in with the grades, maybe you can get in there with a Second Life account. That is hilarious. So you also had the famous Alan Dershowitz as your professor for, was it ethics?
Ethics, yeah.
And you apparently got into a couple of discussions that were a little more passionate, let's just say. How did that all transpire?
Well, again, Alan Dershowitz is a brilliant legal mind. I think he was one of the youngest professors ever at Harvard Law, and he's still there. I believe he's probably about 80 years old now, so he knows what he's doing, and just such a smart man. But I didn't see things eye to eye with him quite often, and even though it was a class about ethics and not necessarily about his past as a practicing attorney, a lot of questions were asked of him by myself and classmates, about some of his infamous clients, including O.J. Simpson. And I remember one of his quotes when we really pushed him on it was like, sometimes you have to represent a guilty man if you feel like the police are railroading him, which in a sense, in my view, I mean, he didn't come out and say it, but yeah, I feel O.J. Simpson's guilty, but he's entitled to representation and the police were acting in the wrong, which might all be true, but for me, the reason that this came up so frequently and was such a discussion with him and myself quite often was that, you're looking at the ethics of the law. And I always told myself, I'm not going to be a hired gun and just go out there and sue people just because some big company's paying me and do things that I would, feel morally compromised by. And he thought that was quite funny. I remember him saying, there isn't a person that's ever gotten to the top that's done everything right. And I told him, I'll find a career that I'll be able to not, bend my morals. And I've been able to do that. But Dershowitz was funny because I'm one of these people that was into true crime also before that was a thing. Yeah. And I would watch a lot of, crime shows in my dorm room. And I remember one day I watched a case that he was involved in and then came to class. And for some reason, he was talking about that very case and saying how this person was totally innocent and he, handled their appeal and telling us what happened. Well, and I had just seen the video and I said, didn't his wife, wasn't she murdered and he left a hypodermic needle up the street in a dumpster? And he froze. He said, how did you know that? So it was kind of like one of those, I think sometimes I didn't know when to not say things. I was just kind of in awe of like, this legend is here and I can ask him questions about something I just saw on TV. But he was great. We just didn't, I couldn't do the things that he did practicing wise, maybe intellectually, but also I feel like our moral compasses were a little bit different, but great professor nonetheless.
Huh. And then you also had Arthur Miller. I know that name as well. I know you studied under him, and apparently he is an eclectic fellow. Why don't you give us a little bit of a peek into one of his classes as well? Because this is just, most people don't get to go to Harvard. So today on the Attorney Post, you guys are getting a virtual Harvard experience. And if you go to Second Life, you can actually get a virtual Harvard experience.
Much cheaper than it cost me, I'll tell you that.
There you go.
So Arthur Miller was a civil procedure professor at Harvard. he was also one of these guys that had been there forever. He recently left. I don't know if he retired, but he went, I think, to NYU for a bit towards the end of his career. But when I was there, he was of the mindset of like the very old style Harvard professors. And I don't know if you've seen Paper Chase or read the book, but it was a popular movie in the 70s with Timothy Bottoms was the main character. And it's essentially about this guy who gets put in there, first year law student, and it's just insanity. Like, it's so difficult, and people are stealing books out of the library, out of competition, and people having mental breakdowns. And when I got into Harvard, I was so excited because I thought, wow, I never in my life would have thought I was going to go there. In my mind, I thought if I could go to Columbia or NYU, like that would be amazing if I could just reach that high. But so then a cousin of mine who's an attorney and quite a bit older said, you got to watch the Paper Chase. And I watched it, and my excitement about going there turned to terror. And then Glenn Morris, who I mentioned earlier, the professor from my department who also went to Harvard, had Glenn Miller or had Professor Arthur Miller, and said, that guy and I just butted heads all the time. I hope you don't get him. And of course I did. And it was a great thing though. I disagree with Glenn on that matter. Arthur Miller would come into class every day in a 3-piece suit. He would walk in with a giant poster board with the layout of the room with our little pictures on it, just like the movie. And I assume some schools still do that. And held his head up high and walked in like a movie star. And I remember like the second day of class, a telephone started ringing on the wall, and it was like a wired phone before cordless phones. And he just like in the middle of the sentence walked over to it, threw it on the ground and stomped on it, and then just went on with class like nothing had happened. And he was quirky like that. He used to always be drinking coffee, and he would have this assistant, and we used to call him Smithers behind his back, unfortunately, at that time, like from The Simpsons. He was kind of like the lackey guy. And he would come into the classroom with a cup of coffee, and right at this certain point in the middle, switch out his cup of coffee so he could continue teaching and drinking his coffee. So he had quite a system down and quite an ego. But the best thing about Arthur Miller is he taught the Socratic method the way it was meant to be taught. And that's why he still practiced these really old paper chase type of methods. And the tie to the Paper Chase is as you stated, there's the book 1L, which a lot of people read. Scott Turow writes a lot of legal books, and he was a Harvard Law student. And one of the characters in that book is based on Arthur Miller, and I believe it's the villain of that book. And then there's a lot of, sometimes Arthur Miller plays up that he's the Paper Chase guy also. I've also heard it's a mishmash of a lot of professors from that time, but he takes pride in that. And he's scary and wonderful. And then I was blessed to learn under him.
Well, that is quite the tale and quite the experience that most of us don't get to experience. So thank you for sharing that with us. So let's get a little bit more into your actual experience in the practice of law. I know you started working with a couple of national foreign firms. You actually did some public finance work. What exactly did you do in public finance? Like what is the realm of public finance even when it comes to law? I mean, we all get divorce attorneys, we all get personal injury attorneys, but when you're doing public finance, what exactly does that take?
Yeah, what does that mean? It's a very unusual field of law. Essentially what that means, it's different in different states, but on the whole, in America, if a government wants to build something, let's just take a school, for example. There's an elementary school that the government wants to build. Mm-hmm. They have to issue bonds to pay for that school. So they sell them to investors and bankers, promising a rate of return to them to make them enticing to those investors. And in turn, the government gets a really good lending deal because the IRS decided, hey, these are the types of projects we want out there. And so there's so much legal paperwork and due diligence that's required to assist in those type of projects. A school is a very basic example. Something like an airport is so complex. But that's in a nutshell, 30-second answer. It's just assisting a form of local government, or sometimes even nonprofits that can also issue municipal debt in capital projects, so construction and so forth.
Okay. And so you also have experience as a bond lawyer then, and somehow, if I'm not mistaken, being a bond lawyer is actually what led you to where you are now working at Denver International. How did that all transpire?
Sure. I started out at Kutek Rock, like you said, and that's a nationwide firm, but they're very well known for their bond group. It's one of the best, if not the best, I believe, in the country. And was there for a bit. And then, like I said, I finished my career at Greenberg Traurig, which also has a good bond department. Denver International, for those of you who have not been out there, is a huge airport. I believe it's the biggest airport in the country, second biggest in the world, next to one in Saudi Arabia that has no borders, that's just in the desert. So in theory, we're the biggest. And the reason for that a lot has to do with noise. So, when you have an airport, people living nearby complain about sound and noise from the jets, and they can ultimately the airport can pay fines for that. So we had the old Stapleton International Airport in Denver for years, and the city decided they wanted to build this new airport, so they built it kind of far out east. At least at that time, it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's a huge piece of land. It's bigger than Manhattan Island. It's 52 square miles, and so we have tons and tons of land to do all kinds of things with. It's like a city in and of itself. But because of that, we have essentially like the real estate development company within the airport, which is very unusual. And to develop that land that was once completely prairie dogs and dust. And so the firm I was at Greenberg, we were outside counsel to the airport for a couple projects, including special district work, which is a type of bond where, for instance, like if a home builder wants to build like a huge tract of homes, they will issue bonds through a complicated process, but in essence, they get voter approval of like 5 people that live there at that time, when in the future there's going to be like 50,000 people. And they say, hey, we need to build all this infrastructure, but we need to issue debt. So they'll enter into debt, and then the actual homeowners end up paying the bill on that through the years of owning their house through the mill levy. So it's kind of controversial, but it needs to be done. It's the way you can really do a lot of these big projects. So Denver was, our den, as we call it, Denver International, was looking into doing that on its land, or at least having expertise in that area. So I went out there quite a bit for some meetings, and I met the general counsel at the time and the assistant general counsel. And we just really hit it off well, especially the general counsel, just a really good guy. It became a very close friend of mine. And they gave me a call one day and said, hey, we really need a finance guy. Is there any chance you want to come out here? And I thought, it's a big risk. Like, the airport's really far, first of all, just practically to drive out there every day. I was almost at partnership level at a law firm, and I knew I'd be taking a step backwards in the pay world, but I thought there's just something about this place that seems exciting. I'm going to do it. So that's how I ended up out there. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It's the best job I've ever had.
That's awesome. So I'm trying to move something out of the way here on my other screen. So I was trying to do a little bit, I was looking at something. So let's get to know you now a little bit better. One of my favorite questions to ask, and I think you're somewhat familiar with the podcast, actually, so you probably heard me ask this question. But I love to learn about people, because the way that you deal with success and failure can tell you a lot about somebody's character. And I really appreciate what you said earlier when you were talking with Dershowitz, and you believed you could follow a path where you didn't have to compromise. I 100% agree with that. I don't think I could live, even if I got paid millions of dollars. I don't know if I could live that sort of a lifestyle where I had to live feeling I had, compromised myself a little bit. But you can also tell a lot about somebody based on how they handle things like success and failure. So if you don't mind, Everett, can you tell us first off, we'll start with the negative side, but I'm sure that somewhere in your practice, your experience and practice of law, you've probably encountered something like a failure, something that maybe it was, you didn't fill out a form correctly. Maybe you had to take something to court and the judge was like, threw it right out, whatever it happens to be. But can you share with our listeners some time when you experienced a loss in a sense, or a failure, but also definitely what it taught you? Because as long as you learn from a failure, obviously it's really a slow burn win. And that's what I'm most interested in. So can you tell our listeners something that you experienced in the practice of law that was a fail, and how you've carried it forward into your current and future practice of law?
Sure. I think, from the law firm side, when I started out, it's not that I did something wrong, like I made some great mistake, which luckily in my career, I've been pretty good at avoiding that, because if I'm ever in a courtroom, it means someone did something really wrong, and that could be me. So that's never happened so far, knock on wood. But when I started out at Kutzek Rock, one of the partners I worked with there, who's since retired, kind of a gruff guy. I didn't know him very well, but this was my first real job as an adult. Yeah. And I remember, so we have these books, and they're called transcripts. And essentially, a bond transaction is so document dense that they end up being like bound novels, or bound books, like you would get an old encyclopedia set. So I have some on my shelves off camera here that they're roughly about that wide. So it's just pages and pages. And I didn't know what I was doing. No one had ever trained me in law school, certainly about public finance. And I got assigned to some very important project with this certain partner. And I asked him a question like, well, how do you want me to figure out how to do this one little task? And he slammed one of those books on the table, and he says, figure it out for your damn self. It's all in here. And it's like, oh, it's in this giant book that's, 4,000 pages that I don't understand. And so then when I had my review, a couple months later, I got good review from everybody in the firm that reviewed me, except for that guy. And his quote that he wrote was, "Everett lacks intellectual curiosity," which to me, you can call me anything you want, and that's fine, but that's not a fair judgment. If anything, I'm a smart person and value learning. So it was kind of a jab. So that kind of set me off on a bad path for a little bit, wondering, is this what law firms are like? And is that what this practice area is like? But luckily, I was then assigned to work with another gentleman in that firm who was a quite older guy. And he was fantastic. Like, he took the time like you need to do when you're teaching somebody for the first time a unique subject matter. And after that, I flourished, and everything was great after that. But it kind of really threw me little words like that. It made me feel like perhaps I'd made a mistake. I think the other bigger, perhaps it's not a failure, but just like loss and having to dust yourself off is so everybody knows, law school's super hard. The first semester is super hard. Harvard law is super hard. Well, about 2 weeks before finals in the first semester, my father passed away. And I had to, I flew home to Colorado to see him. He'd had a stroke, and his doctor said, he's going to be okay for a while. Go back to school. You need to be there. So I went back, and like 2 days later, he died. So I had to fly back again. And, as anyone that's been through something like that, it's horrible and very, it throws your world upside down, and you're never the same. But I remember, they kept him in our home so I could see him before they took him to the mortuary. And I collapsed, like in the movies. Like, sometimes your legs just give out from emotion. Yeah. And as soon as I got up and got myself together, my neighbor was in the house, and he said, "So are you gonna, go back next year to Harvard?" And I said, "I'm going back next week after the funeral, because the guy in there that passed away would expect nothing less of me." And I did that. And it was a hard thing. It's hard to mourn and go through, preparing for finals and all that stress. But I think it's really what my dad would have wanted. He wanted me to go after my goals like that. So that was a hard thing to get past, but it made me look back at things at Harvard and life. Like, I've been through some trials and came out the other end fine.
In our pre-meeting, you had alluded to the fact that your father had passed away when you were in law school, and that Arthur Miller had said something to you that was either very emotional or very not emotional.
Not emotional.
Are you comfortable sharing that with everyone listening?
Yeah, certainly. No, I tell everybody this, but I think it's funny. It's a good snapshot of who I'm talking about here, because he means well, right? But he just didn't have that touch to show emotion. So my classmates were great, and some of them sent flowers to my house and signed a card, a condolence card, and they all wrote messages to me. And he just wrote, "Recover, Arthur Miller." And I thought, like, wow, that's I will recover. Thank you, sir. And people were like, we were so impressed that he was sweet enough to sign it. And I'm like, if you saw what he wrote, you would be like, yeah, that's the guy I figured they would write something like that. But it was great. It's just he just doesn't express emotions the way that a lot of us would.
That's funny. So the first story that you told, you mentioned the 4,000 page tome that got slammed down in front of you. The one thing you didn't mention is, did you read it?
I did, but it's so in the grass. I don't want to put anyone to sleep. But basically, what happens is, like, if you're going to purchase like a mutual fund or something, you have a prospectus which tells you, the financial history of that fund and why you would want to buy it. Well, in my world, you do a similar thing called an official statement, and it's a big book that tells you everything you need to know as an investor about why you should buy these bonds or shouldn't buy them. And a lot of times, like, a lot of the documents that are put in there are summaries of super huge documents. And they said, "Everett, we need you to do some document summaries." And it's like, well, yeah, as a person, I understand that means I need to abbreviate some type of document, but they didn't tell me what documents, what that really meant, what kinds of things you want in and want out. And his solution to that was slam the book down and tell me to figure it out myself, which I did. But I'm sure looking back on it, I probably didn't do the best job because I didn't know what I was doing. Today, I could do them in my sleep, but it's just the way it was. It was a steep learning curve initially.
I just was kind of picturing you, the bathtub and the candlelight and a 4,000 page tome, having a nice relaxing read and whatnot.
Yeah, no, it's not like that. They're good for raising your monitor now in the Zoom world. That's about that's the most time I reach for them now.
You want to get that camera up at a good angle so you get that top
that's
down.
Right.
So you just need a couple of those and you're all set. We're going to get to successes in a minute, but I realized one of the other questions I want to ask you. Obviously, everyone's been under COVID. We've all been under the pandemic, and of course, the response to the pandemic. I actually haven't heard a lot out of Colorado. You're just one state over too, so you're kind of my next door neighbor.
Our neighbors.
I've talked to attorneys in California where they had, rather strict lockdowns. I've had attorneys in Texas and Florida where they've been a little more lenient. Here in Kansas, it kind of varies. I talked to an attorney in Canada, and he's like, it's the word he used was, and I think accurately so, was draconian. How has the pandemic and the response to the pandemic affected you and your practice of law, particularly being attached to an airport? I know there's a lot of discussion about, hurdling people through the air in these tubes of aluminum as we do, and whether or not it makes sense. And some people even pointed out they think it doesn't make sense. And I've heard various points, and I don't know how much you know about this and how much you can even talk about it, but you'll see people queuing for the airport or for boarding, and they're 6 feet apart or whatever, and then of course you get on the airplane and everyone's just crammed together and like, well, this doesn't even make any sense. But some people say, well, no, the air circulation is really good and whatnot. So I don't know how much of that you have any effect in at all, but I thought I'd at least throw it out there, see how COVID's affected you, and if you have any thoughts on any of that.
Sure. It certainly has affected my practice. I was the finance lawyer, like I said, when COVID started. And right around that time, I had applied to become the Assistant General Counsel. So this entire, year and some change that me having that job as a supervisor has been through Zoom. So that's kind of a weird thing to be learning that way too, just, for starters. But from the airport standpoint, yeah, like what you mentioned about airplanes, even though that's not something we handle, like the TSA has a lot to do with the health orders that come out regarding masks in airports and social distancing and occupancy of planes. But if you want my insider information, and I'm a germaphobe big time, but from what I understand, planes are one of the safest places you can be, even though you're close to people, because they've invested so much money and technology into the filtration, as you mentioned. And there's been a lot of studies on that it's a very safe place to be. I would still recommend people wear masks, from what I've seen. As far as just being an employee of the City and County of Denver and attorney to Den, I was so thankful that, our mayor shut it down quick, but in a fair way. That told all the employees, you guys are working from home, probably a little bit earlier than most people would. And it made me feel comfort that I wasn't going to get my 80-year-old mother sick working at, the hub of the Rockies, where people from all over the world could be coming in. And, the city attorney, a brilliant woman, she handled it so well and just led the team for the last year through this remote world. And we've gotten to the point now where we're talking about doing a permanent split of work from home and some in the office when things get back, because people did such a good job being home. From the airport standpoint, also a big issue was just, you have all these concessionaires that are losing money that are, that we're counting on passenger flow. They're gone. There's a lot of stimulus money that came to the airport. So I've worked quite a bit on how that gets doled out to different concessionaires or rent abatements or deferrals of rent. Also with the airline, similar discussions that happened. So it's been quite an eventful year to be an attorney working for an airport for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I would imagine there'd be a lot of very unique challenges that came up, which is why I was really fascinated. And I didn't even think about it. I mean, I did repeatedly at the time, but when we were talking about this earlier, I didn't think about the fact that, airports they are hubs of travel. And so, the question becomes, do we just shut down all air travel, period? So we're not like quickly disseminating this potentially hazardous virus, et cetera. This is really just it is a fascinating and unprecedented time to be alive in general. And so I'm sure you had some very unique weigh in on that and whatnot. So I'm glad to hear. I am glad to hear that you think that the air filtration in the planes is really good. Again, that's what I've heard. I've heard a lot of people say it looks funny. It looks hypocritical even, but it's not. And the reason is the science and technology behind the air filtration. So we just need to get that implemented in a lot of other places, I guess. Good.
Yeah, in the office or wherever else. Yeah. No, I think that the numbers are picking up quite a bit, especially at our airport too. Like things are really returning to normal over the last couple of weeks, especially I think just due to vaccination rates and stuff like that. So there's good days ahead for the travel industry in America if we just hang on a bit.
Yeah, I feel like I think we as a culture, as humanity, let alone just as a country, I think we all kind of are feeling a little bit like, okay, we're getting over this. We're close to being done with this. Enough people have either caught it or have been vaccinated that even if we're not at herd immunity, we're pretty close. There comes a point, I mean, herd immunity is defined, and we don't need to get into the science of COVID on here, lest I get struck down by YouTube and everyone else. But, it's a nebulous science where people will take the best guesses and whatnot. So
comment below, right?
Yeah, comment below. Please be sure to flag this video and let YouTube know. So anyway, all right. Well, let's get off that topic then. So let's go back. We've heard about some of your failures. We've heard about the 4,000 page tome and whatnot. But I'm sure you've also had some big wins. In fact, I think there was a giant bond project you were involved with, amongst other things, if I recall. And so share with our listeners a couple of the moments. It doesn't have to be that, but share with our listeners a couple of the moments that you're most proud of in your legal journey.
Sure. The most recent for me is being named Assistant General Counsel to DEN. That it just shows that I took that leap of faith that I mentioned at the beginning to come out to the airport, and people saw the value in the work I was doing, and enough that the CEO of the airport and the city attorney I mentioned, and my bosses at the time, saw that I was a hard worker and a smart guy, and they moved me up to a position that I feel like my skill set's meeting my job now in a good way. Overall, like career-wise, though, that bond deal you mentioned, in 2018, Denver International issued a bond project of $2.5 billion with a B. And for context, that was the biggest aviation bond deal in U.S. history. Still may be, I think it is, which was cool in and of itself. That was really great. But in my little finance world of finance nerds that do bonds, there's a publication called The Bond Buyer in New York, which is very popular for the investment community. And they pick one deal a year that was transformational and innovative, of the project that you're doing and the scope of the finances and how it's laid out. And we won that. We won Bond Buyer Deal of the Year, which when I started out, if I would have heard that when the guy slammed the book down and said I didn't have intellectual curiosity, and I knew one day that I would be winning the biggest award in that industry, it would really put things in perspective. And that was just such a fun thing to experience with my colleagues, because we all worked so hard on that. But that was great. And that's one of the few trophies I've kept in my life, because it really meant a lot to me. It was a cool event, and just a great experience.
That's awesome. That's crazy. Anyway, so I had a couple other questions that were percolating in my head, and a couple of them have come and gone as they do. It's just fascinating. And again, you have such a wide experience in law. I just I love the stories you've been telling, and just picking your brain in general. So I'll tell you what, here in a minute, what I'm going to do, and it's a question it's a power really that I give to a lot of the people that I talk to, but I think yours is going to be a little bit different because again, how you experience the law is a little bit different, but maybe not. This is my InkJoy pen. We are not sponsored by InkJoy in any way, but this is a magical pen, and I love this pen because it writes really well. Not a sponsor, but Papermate, feel free to reach out. With this pen, Everett, I'm going to allow you, it's magical, to strike any law from the books or edit it in any way. And it can be any law you want. It can be a law that you want to get rid of. It can be a law that you think that needs to be changed, one that affects you, one that affects the airport. It could be something as trivial as something that makes you fill out things in triplicate, right? I don't really care. But I just want to know what you would change. So percolate on that for a minute. While you do that, we're going to jump over here and remind everybody, first off, if they want to connect with Everett, I can't imagine not wanting to connect with Everett. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. If you want to connect with Everett, here is his LinkedIn profile, Everett Martinez. And again, we'll have a link down below. You can see his history and everything else. A lot of experience. Of course, again, Harvard grad, University of Denver, Colorado, etc. So great guy to talk to, and do feel free to connect with him down below. We are going to jump over and read from our second sponsor, and our second sponsor today, built on the Groove Funnels platform for this particular webpage anyway, is Rocket SEO from hundreds of customers. Are you a business owner who knows that being on page one of Google is important, but you're afraid to work with a search engine optimization company because you know that SEO is both expensive and slow? Well, it doesn't have to be. Not anymore. Rocket SEO from hundreds of customers first forces you to page one of Google safely and legally to the power of the news media. Rocket SEO utilizes national news media campaigns across the gamut of news sites that simply rank instantly. With Rocket SEO, you can boost your website's ranking in Google in 1 week or less with a simple system that leverages the power of major media companies, news sites, and network affiliates of ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, as well as local news sources from the Boston Herald to the Sacramento Bee and all stops in between across the United States to put you on page one of Google in under a week, oftentimes 2 or 3 times on page one, and oftentimes for dozens of keywords. To learn more, email press@hundredsofcustomers.com or visit hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. That's hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. All right. So, Everett, I'm going to give you the magical pin. And with this magical pin, you can strike any law from the books. You can make a change. What is something in the law that you want to see changed or tweaked or fixed or added even?
Sure. It's not necessarily a law, but for like greater society in our country, I feel like the cost of legal services is very prohibitive to people that are struggling. And I always, I'm not a very religious person, but when I was in church one time, like right after I graduated from law school, the priest called me up unexpectedly in the middle of a mass and said, let's all pray over Everett and hope that he, when people ask him for help, that he doesn't turn his back to them. So even though I'm a bond guy and now, do the airport stuff, darn near anytime anyone has ever asked me for legal help or anything, I've given it to them. And just for that reason, because I was given such a blessing to get that golden ticket to go somewhere like Harvard and do the things I've done, that if someone asks me for help, I can't turn my back on them. I'll put them in touch with somebody that can help them, or I'll give them my thoughts on it. But I always do that. And if there's a way that, that there was more affordable legal care that's quality for people, I think that would really help out on family law, criminal, for darn sure. A lot of people wouldn't be in jail right now, as long as they were, if they had proper counsel. So, so aside from that, I know that typically you ask your
So, all right. So if you can go back, one more fun question here, and then we'll probably wrap things up. I don't want to take up too much of your time today. And you've been very generous with your time, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. This is one of my favorite conversations we've had, just because it's been it's a very non-traditional discussion, but I like that. It's a lot of fun, and you've got a lot of stories and a lot of insight, which is great. So let's assume with my magical pen, we also have the ability to transport back in time, and we can find young Everett at Harvard Law right now. And if you could give yourself a piece of advice, especially, maybe one of those times when you're having your doubts or whatnot, what advice would you give yourself? And by extension, of course, anyone who's looking at law school or in law school right now, or getting started as an attorney, what's the best advice that you would give someone, or again, give to young Everett?
Sure. And I do give this advice to students. Anytime anyone tells me they're interested in law school, or they're law students wondering what they want to do, I always say it's very important that you get some type of experience with the area you're interested in. And I don't mean that through like a school setting, like doing, some type of class in that. Yeah, that's one level. But what I'm talking about is befriend somebody, network somebody that, like, if you were a sick person like me and wanted to be a public finance attorney, you find yourself a public finance attorney and let them, you can attach yourself to them for a little bit, see what their day-to-day life is like and what that job really entails. Because I think a lot of times people think, I want to go into this area of law or that area because of money, or it seems exciting. But then law firms are filled with, millions of very depressed people that are stuck in their job with golden handcuffs. And I saw that all the time. For myself, I should have followed that advice too. I think it would have been a lot less of a shock for me of what I was really getting into and what I needed to learn. If I had to do things over again, I think maybe I would have opened my own practice out of school of some sort, maybe something totally different, but I would have liked to have been my own boss and not gone through the law firm world and in the politics that's involved there. And the biggest thing I would recommend to myself was to just stick, keep in mind that there's better days ahead. Because I remember years of being in law firms where, even though I liked my coworkers and the work I was doing, I never felt like, wow, this is really interesting work, or I feel fulfilled and I'm doing what I can be doing, until I came to the airport. And then that door blew open and I'm happy now for the first time in my career, which it took a long time. And I wish I'd have known that these days were awaiting me.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, being patient and I think that's just good general advice, right? Trust, even if it sucks right now, get through it. You will eventually find, have faith that you'll find that place that makes you happy. And our listeners, longtime listeners may know, I've actually had 3 different businesses that all eventually went, belly up. It happens, right? One of them, I had an online store for years that sold geeky jewelry. Of all the silly things, I kind of fell into it. And then I had a bunch of people start copying what I was doing. And then Facebook shut down my stuff, so I couldn't advertise during the holiday season. And just like, it's frustrating. It's like, literally, I did nothing wrong and I lost the whole thing. And it does happen. But if you just stick with it and and keep at it. You will learn the skills you need. You'll find yourself in a way that you can prosper where you're planted, as they say, or get up and uproot yourself and move to where you can prosper even better. So, but overall, I think that's great advice. Well, Everett, thank you very much for taking time to meet with me today. I really have enjoyed this conversation immensely, as I said. As always, I like to give my guests the final word. Obviously, you've already given some great advice, but do you have any final thoughts or parting words for our listeners?
It's first of all, appreciate anybody that's listened and stayed this long. It's fun to hear these stories of them myself because I haven't really thought about them in quite a while. And thank you, Justin, for having me on.
Absolutely.
But just know that if there's anything I could ever do, any questions, something related to this, there's other people in the industry or local government. I'm always a phone call away, and here to help out however I can.
All right, we'll make sure you have 500 people asking you for help with traffic tickets by the end of the week. You'll be set. So.
I'll send them somewhere.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much, Everett, for meeting with me today. We had a great conversation today. Again, I've been talking with Everett Martinez, who is, I forgot one of your titles, at least the Assistant General Counsel for Denver International Airport, amongst other things, located out in the Mile High State. I'm Justin West, of course. I am your host here on the Attorney Post. And you've been listening to a discussion about the law. As always, this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you have legal advice or a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter you need help with. It sounds like you can reach out to Everett. And I will put his information down below, including his home cell phone number and his personal address. No, but if you do have something you want to connect with Everett about, I will put his LinkedIn stuff down below. Seems like a really great guy and a great contact, a great resource to have. This is the Attorney Post. You can find us online at theattorneypost.com. Of course, we are also on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. We always do appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. Until next time, remember, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye.